The champagne flute slipped from my fingers, crystal shattering against the marble floor of the grand ballroom as Derek's words echoed through my mind. Amanda, I've fallen in love with someone else. Vanessa and I are leaving together tonight. The entire anniversary party froze around us, 200 guests witnessing my humiliation unfold in real time. What my cheating husband and his precious life insurance agent didn't know was that I owned every contract, every policy, and every commission check she'd ever earned. Let me tell you how their fairy tale became my greatest business victory. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning of our 15th anniversary started like any other Tuesday in our pristine Denver suburb. I stood in our gourmet kitchen, arranging white roses in a crystal vase while Derek scrolled through his phone at the breakfast counter. The silence between us had become so familiar that I barely noticed it anymore, the comfortable quiet of a couple who'd settled into predictable rhythms. Outside our floor-to-ceiling windows, the Rocky Mountains painted a picture-perfect backdrop for what should have been a celebration of our enduring love. Derek had been working late more frequently over the past 6 months, claiming his marketing firm was expanding into new territories. I'd supported him the way I always did, managing our social calendar, maintaining our home, and ensuring his professional image remained flawless. The irony wasn't lost on me that while I orchestrated every detail of our public success, I'd gradually become invisible in my own marriage. The anniversary party had been my idea, naturally. A sophisticated gathering at the Ritz-Carlton Denver, complete with a live jazz quartet and a menu crafted by their award-winning chef. I'd spent weeks coordinating with vendors, selecting the perfect combination of Derek's business associates and our longtime friends. Every detail reflected the image we'd cultivated over 15 years of marriage, the successful power couple who seemed to have everything figured out. I slipped into my navy silk dress that evening, the one Derek had complimented years ago but barely glanced at anymore. The woman staring back at me from our bedroom mirror looked polished and put together, her auburn hair swept into an elegant chignon, her makeup applied with practiced precision. Yet behind the carefully constructed facade, I felt increasingly like an actress playing a role I'd outgrown. The grand ballroom sparkled under crystal chandeliers as guests began arriving. I moved through the crowd with practiced grace, accepting congratulations and warm wishes while Derek worked the room separately. We'd become experts at parallel socializing, appearing together for photos but rarely actually connecting throughout the evening. I watched him charm a group of his colleagues near the bar, his laugh genuine in a way it rarely was at home anymore. That's when I noticed her for the first time. Vanessa Park stood slightly apart from Derek's circle, a stunning woman in her early 30s with glossy black hair and a confident smile. She wore a red dress that hugged her curves perfectly, and her eyes never left Derek's face as he spoke. Something about their body language sent a chill down my spine, an intimacy that transcended professional networking. I approached their group with a bright smile, slipping my arm through Derek's in a gesture that felt more performative than natural. He introduced Vanessa as his life insurance agent, someone who'd been helping him review our policies and investment strategies. Her handshake was firm, her smile warm but somehow calculating as she looked me up and down. Amanda, Derek has told me so much about you, Vanessa said, her voice smooth as honey. Congratulations on 15 wonderful years. You're so lucky to have found each other. The words should have felt like a compliment, but something in her tone suggested she knew secrets I didn't. Derek's arm tensed beneath my touch, and he quickly steered the conversation toward business topics that effectively excluded me from the discussion. I excused myself to check on the catering arrangements, but the uneasy feeling in my stomach only intensified. Throughout the evening, I found myself watching Derek and Vanessa from across the room. They seemed magnetically drawn to each other, always ending up in the same conversations, sharing glances that lasted just a moment too long. When the jazz quartet began playing our wedding song, Derek was nowhere to be found. I spotted him on the hotel's outdoor terrace, deep in conversation with Vanessa under the twinkling lights. My best friend Caroline appeared at my elbow, following my gaze toward the terrace. Everything all right, honey? You look like you've seen a ghost. I forced another smile, the same mask I'd been wearing all evening. Just making sure everyone's having a good time. You know how these events can be. Caroline's expression softened with concern. When's the last time you and Derek took a real vacation together? Just the two of you? You both seem so focused on work lately. Her innocent question hit deeper. Then she realized. Derek and I hadn't traveled alone together in over 2 years. Our last attempt at a romantic getaway had been cut short by his urgent work calls and my own anxiety about leaving our carefully managed life unattended. We'd become business partners in the enterprise of our marriage, but somewhere along the way, we'd forgotten to be lovers. The evening progressed with speeches from Derek's business partner and a few close friends, each toast highlighting our apparent happiness and success. I played my part perfectly, laughing at the right moments and gazing adoringly at my husband. When the spotlight found us. But beneath the surface, I felt increasingly disconnected from the celebration of our love story. As the party wound down and guests began saying their goodbyes, Derek seemed agitated and distracted. He kept checking his phone and glancing toward the exit, his earlier charm replaced by barely concealed impatience. I was saying farewell to Caroline when I realized Derek had disappeared again. I found him in the hotel lobby, standing close to Vanessa near the valet station. They weren't touching, but the energy between them crackled with tension. As I approached, their conversation stopped abruptly, guilty expressions flashing across both their faces. "There you are," I said lightly, though my heart was pounding. "Ready to head home? It's been such a wonderful evening." Derek's jaw tightened, and he exchanged a meaningful look with Vanessa before turning to face me fully. The lobby suddenly felt cavernous around us, the marble walls echoing with the distant sounds of late-night hotel activity. "Amanda, we need to talk," Derek said, his voice strained. "Not here, but we need to talk." Vanessa stepped forward, her earlier warmth replaced by something sharper, more determined. "Actually, Derek, maybe we should just tell her now. Waiting will only make it harder." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. I felt the blood drain from my face as understanding crashed over me in nauseating waves. The late nights, the distant behavior, the way they looked at each other all evening suddenly formed a clear and devastating picture. "Tell me what?" I whispered, though I already knew the answer would shatter everything I thought I understood about my life. Derek ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I'd seen countless times during stressful moments throughout our marriage. But this time, the stress was directed at me, not shared with me. "Amanda, I've fallen in love with someone else," he said, his voice barely above a whisper but cutting through me like a blade. "Vanessa and I are leaving together tonight. I'm sorry it happened this way, but I can't pretend anymore." The lobby tilted around me as the words registered. Guests from our anniversary party were still trickling through the space, some stopping to offer final congratulations before noticing the tension radiating from our small group. I watched several familiar faces register confusion and concern as they observed our body language. "You're leaving," I repeated numbly, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. "Tonight. After our anniversary party." Vanessa stepped closer to Derek, her hand finding his arm in a gesture of support and ownership. "We didn't plan for this to happen, Amanda. But sometimes life takes unexpected turns. Derek deserves to be happy." The casual cruelty of her words snapped me back to awareness. Here was a woman who'd infiltrated my marriage under the guise of professional services, who'd smiled at me all evening while planning to destroy my life, now lecturing me about my husband's happiness. "How long?" I asked, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. Derek shifted uncomfortably, unable to meet my eyes. 6 months. It started when she was helping me restructure our life insurance policies. "Amanda, you have to understand, we've been drifting apart for years. You know this isn't working anymore." 6 months. Half a year of deception, of coming home to me every night while building a secret life with another woman. Half a year of me planning anniversary celebrations and dinner parties while he planned his escape. The hotel's crystal chandelier cast prismatic light across the marble floor as my 15-year marriage crumbled in real time. Other guests continued moving around us, their celebration attire and joyful conversations a surreal backdrop to my personal apocalypse. "What about our life together?" I asked, my voice growing stronger. "Our home, our plans, everything we've built." Derek's expression hardened slightly, and I caught a glimpse of the man he'd become in recent years, someone I barely recognized. "You'll be fine, Amanda. You're smart, capable. You'll figure it out. We both know you're better at managing things than I ever was." The dismissive tone in his voice ignited something fierce inside me. 15 years of supporting his career, managing our social obligations, and maintaining the perfect image he demanded, and this was how he saw me. A competent administrator who would handle the logistics of our divorce just as efficiently as she'd handled everything else. Vanessa pulled out her phone, checking the time with theatrical impatience. "Derek, the car will be here soon. We should get your bags from upstairs." My husband nodded, his decision clearly already made. "Amanda, I'll call you tomorrow about the practical arrangements. We can handle this like adults." As they turned toward the elevator bank, I stood frozen in the marble lobby of the hotel where we'd just celebrated 15 years of marriage. The champagne I'd consumed throughout the evening now tasted bitter in my mouth, and the elegant dress I'd chosen with such care felt like a costume for a play that had ended without warning. Caroline appeared at my side, having witnessed the final moments of the confrontation. Her face was pale with shock as she wrapped a protective arm around my shoulders. "Oh honey," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. What can I do? Do you want me to drive you home?" I shook my head slowly, still processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. "I think I need to sit down for a minute." We found chairs in the hotel's lounge area, away from the remaining anniversary guests who were beginning to notice something was wrong. Caroline ordered coffee while I stared at my hands, my wedding ring catching the light from the nearby fireplace. "Did you have any idea?" Caroline asked gently. I considered the question carefully. Had there been signs I'd ignored or explained away? Derek's increased focus on insurance and investment planning had seemed like responsible financial management. His longer work hours and frequent client dinners had appeared to be career advancement. Even his emotional distance had felt like a natural evolution of a mature marriage. "I thought we were just busy," I admitted. "I thought we were both focused on our careers and that the romance would come back when things settled down. I never imagined he was building a completely different life." Caroline squeezed my hand supportively. "What will you do now? Do you want to stay at my place tonight?" The practical questions began flooding my mind. Our shared bank accounts, the mortgage on our house, the social circle we'd cultivated together. Derek had been the primary breadwinner throughout our marriage, his marketing director's salary supporting our comfortable lifestyle while I'd managed our domestic affairs and occasional freelance consulting projects. But as I sat in that hotel lounge, surrounded by the debris of my shattered marriage, something unexpected began stirring beneath the shock and hurt. A memory surfaced from years ago, a business opportunity I'd pursued quietly while Derek focused on his career. An investment strategy I'd developed independently, a company I'd been building piece by piece while maintaining the facade of the devoted wife. For the first time since Derek's announcement, I felt the corners of my mouth curve into something resembling a smile. Vanessa Park, the life insurance agent who thought she'd won the ultimate prize, had no idea what she'd actually stepped into. Neither did my soon-to-be ex-husband. "Actually, Caroline," I said, standing up with renewed purpose, "I think I'm going to be just fine. In fact, I think Derek and Vanessa are in for quite a surprise." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The next morning would bring phone calls to lawyers and accountants, difficult conversations with friends and family, and the beginning of a very public unraveling. But tonight, as I watched the elevator doors close on my husband and his new life, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. I felt free. The morning sunlight streaming through our bedroom windows felt different somehow, sharper and more unforgiving as it illuminated the empty spaces where Derek's belongings used to be. His closet gaped open like a wound, revealing the systematic way he'd removed every trace of himself from our shared life. The coffee maker sat silent in the kitchen, no longer programmed for 2 cups at 6:30 each morning. Even the morning paper lay unopened on our granite countertop, since Derek had always been the one to read the business section aloud while I prepared breakfast. I stood in my silk pajamas, staring at the untouched bed where I'd spent the night alone for the first time in 15 years. Sleep had come in fragments, interrupted by the phantom sound of Derek's key in the front door and the crushing realization each time I remembered he wouldn't be coming home. The house felt cavernous around me, every room echoing with the absence of the life we'd built together. My phone had been buzzing since dawn with concerned messages from friends who'd witnessed last night's disaster. Caroline had texted 3 times, offering to bring coffee and moral support. My sister in Portland had called twice, having heard the news through our family's efficient gossip network. Even our housekeeper, Maria, had left a voicemail expressing her sympathy and asking whether she should continue her regular Thursday cleaning schedule. But I ignored them all, my attention focused on something far more important than managing the social fallout of my failed marriage. Sitting at Derek's former desk in our home office, I opened my laptop and began making a series of phone calls. That would change everything. The first call went to Robert Chen, a seasoned business consultant I'd been working with secretly for the past 3 years. His calm, professional voice answered on the second ring, already aware of why I might be calling so early. "Amanda, I heard about last night through the business community grapevine. I'm sorry you had to endure that publicly, but perhaps it's time to move forward with our discussions." Robert had been instrumental in helping me structure a complex web of business investments and acquisitions that Derek knew nothing about. What had started as a modest inheritance from my grandmother 5 years ago had grown into something substantial under Robert's guidance and my own careful planning. While Derek focused on his marketing career and assumed I was content with managing our domestic life, I'd been building an empire. "Robert, I need you to pull together everything we've discussed about the insurance sector acquisitions. Specifically, the subsidiary companies under the Pinnacle Financial Group umbrella." There was a pause on the line as Robert accessed his Files. Are you referring to Mountain State Insurance Services? The company that was struggling financially before we acquired it 18 months ago? Mountain State Insurance Services. The very company where Vanessa Park worked as a life insurance agent, blissfully unaware that her paychecks ultimately came from the woman whose husband she'd just stolen. The irony was so perfect it almost made me laugh. That's exactly what I'm referring to. I want a complete breakdown of their current agent roster, commission structures, and pending policies. Particularly anything related to agents in the Denver metropolitan area. Robert's voice carried a note of understanding. I'll have my team compile that information within the hour. Should I also prepare the documentation showing your controlling interest in the parent company? The parent company. Pinnacle Financial Group, which I'd quietly acquired a controlling stake in through a series of carefully structured purchases over the past 2 years. Derek had been so focused on his own career trajectory that he'd never questioned my occasional business trips or the professional calls I took in private. He'd assumed my inherited money was sitting safely in conservative investments, earning modest returns while I played the role of supportive wife. Yes, prepare everything. I have a feeling we're going to need comprehensive documentation very soon. After ending the call with Robert, I contacted Patricia Rodriguez, my assistant and the only person outside of Robert who knew the full scope of my business activities. Patty had been invaluable in maintaining the discretion necessary to keep my acquisitions hidden from Derek, handling paperwork and communications through her own consulting firm rather than directly through our household. Amanda, honey, I'm so sorry about what happened last night. Are you holding up okay? Patty's maternal concern was genuine, but I could hear the anticipation in her voice. She'd been waiting for this moment almost as long as I had, knowing that eventually Derek's self-centered nature would create an opportunity for me to step out of the shadows. I'm better than okay, Patty. It's time to stop hiding. Can you clear your schedule for the next few days? We have some very important meetings to arrange. Already done. I canceled everything non-essential the moment Caroline called me last night. What do you need first? I walked to the window overlooking our manicured backyard, where Derek had installed an expensive outdoor kitchen that we'd used exactly 3 times in 2 years. The symbolism wasn't lost on me, all those carefully curated lifestyle choices that looked perfect from the outside but had no real substance or joy behind them. I want you to set up a meeting with the entire leadership team at Mountain State Insurance Services for tomorrow morning. Don't give them any details about why I'm coming, just that the primary stakeholder of their parent company needs to discuss some urgent matters regarding their operations. Patty's typing was audible through the phone as she made notes. Should I mention your name specifically? Not yet. Let them wonder who's been signing their paychecks all this time. The second call I made was to Catherine Morrison, the attorney who'd been handling my business legal matters. Catherine was a sharp woman in her 50s who specialized in complex corporate structures and had helped me navigate the delicate process of acquiring companies without triggering public attention. Catherine, it's Amanda Hayes. I need to accelerate our timeline for several matters we've been discussing. I assume this is related to your personal situation? I have to say, Amanda, your timing is impeccable. Having leverage during divorce proceedings is always advantageous. Catherine's pragmatic approach to both business and personal legal matters was exactly why I'd chosen her. She understood that my marriage's collapse wasn't just an emotional crisis but a strategic opportunity to finally reveal the business empire I'd been building. I need divorce papers prepared immediately, but more importantly, I want to exercise the dormant ownership clauses in several of our subsidiary acquisitions. Specifically, I want direct operational control of Mountain State Insurance Services transferred to me by close of business Friday. That's aggressive, but certainly doable given your majority stake. Should I prepare for any resistance from current management? I considered the question while reviewing the files spread across Derek's former desk. The current management team at Mountain State had been competent enough to keep the company profitable after my acquisition, but they'd been operating under the assumption that their ownership structure was stable and distant. They were about to learn otherwise. Prepare for confusion more than resistance. Most of them don't even know they've been working for me all along. The third call required more delicate handling. I dialed the direct line for James Hartwell, the CEO of Pinnacle Financial Group and the man who'd been reporting to me quarterly without ever meeting me face to face. Our relationship had been conducted entirely through legal representatives and written communications, maintaining the anonymity I'd required while building my portfolio. Mr. Hartwell, this is Amanda Hayes, the primary stakeholder in Pinnacle Financial Group. I believe it's time we spoke directly. The silence on the line stretched for several seconds as James processed the significance of this unprecedented direct contact. Our previous arrangement had specifically avoided personal communication, making this call a clear signal that something fundamental was changing. Ms. Hayes, it's an honor to finally speak with you directly. How can I assist you today? I'm calling to inform you that I'll be taking a more active role in the operations of several subsidiary companies, effective immediately. I'll need you to prepare comprehensive reports on all insurance agencies under our umbrella, with particular attention to agent performance metrics and commission structures. James's voice carried a note of concern. Of course, we can prepare those reports. May I ask if there are specific performance issues that have prompted this increased oversight? Let's just say I've become aware of some conflicts of interest that require immediate attention. I'll be conducting personal reviews of key personnel across all our insurance subsidiaries. After ending the call with James, I allowed myself a moment to fully absorb the magnitude of what I was setting in motion. For 3 years, I'd been content to remain in the background, collecting dividends and building wealth while maintaining the fiction of being Derek's supportive but financially dependent wife. The arrangement had served my purposes, allowing me to accumulate real power while Derek believed he held all the cards in our relationship. But Derek's betrayal had changed everything. His assumption that I would be helpless and financially vulnerable after our divorce was about to be spectacularly proven wrong. More importantly, his choice to leave me for Vanessa Park had handed me the perfect opportunity to demonstrate exactly how little power either of them actually possessed. The afternoon brought a stream of visitors to our house, each one offering sympathy and support while clearly fishing for details about what had happened. Caroline arrived first, laden with groceries and wine, her face a mask of righteous indignation on my behalf. "I still can't believe he did that to you in public," she said, unpacking items in our kitchen as if preparing for a siege. "And that woman, standing there so smug while she destroyed your marriage. Have you heard from him today?" I accepted the glass of wine Caroline poured, using the time to consider how much to reveal. My friends knew me as the devoted wife who'd prioritized Derek's career over her own ambitions, someone who'd been content to manage their social life while he earned their income. The truth about my business activities would shatter that perception completely. He sent a text this morning asking me to have his remaining belongings packed for pickup this weekend. Very practical and efficient, just like everything else about Derek. Caroline's expression darkened. He's treating this like a business transaction. 15 years of marriage, and he's worried about his belongings. What about your financial security? Do you have access to independent funds? The question was natural given what Caroline knew about my life, but her concern was touching even if unnecessary. I'll be fine financially, Caroline. Better than fine, actually. My sister Laura called while Caroline was still there, her voice tight with worry from 2,000 miles away in Portland. Laura had never liked Derek, finding him controlling and dismissive, but she'd kept her opinions mostly to herself for the sake of family harmony. "Amanda, I can fly out tonight if you need me there. Mom is beside herself with worry, and Dad keeps talking about driving down there to have words with Derek." The mental image of our 72-year-old father confronting Derek was both touching and amusing. That's sweet of Dad, but completely unnecessary. "I'm handling everything just fine." "Are you sure? I know Derek managed most of your finances. Do you need me to loan you money for a good lawyer?" Laura's offer revealed how thoroughly I'd hidden my true financial situation from everyone, including my own family. They all believed Derek's version of our life, where he was the successful provider and I was the grateful dependent wife. "I appreciate the offer, but I already have excellent legal representation. Trust me, Laura, Derek is going to be far more surprised by this divorce than I am." That evening, after Caroline and the other well-meaning visitors had left, I finally returned Derek's text message. My response was brief and professional, informing him that his belongings would be ready for pickup on Saturday morning and that he should bring someone to help him load everything into a truck. His reply came within minutes, clearly eager to finalize the practical aspects of our separation as quickly as possible. "Thanks for being reasonable about this. Vanessa says you seem like you're handling things well." The casual mention of Vanessa discussing me with Derek sparked a flash of anger that I quickly channeled into determination. They were both so confident in their superior position, so certain that Derek had traded up from a dependent wife to an exciting new partner. Neither of them had any idea that Vanessa's entire career was built on commissions from my company. I spent the evening reviewing financial documents that Patty had quietly delivered, familiarizing myself with details I'd previously left to Robert and Catherine to manage. The scope of my holdings was impressive even to me, accumulated through patient investment and strategic acquisitions over several years. Mountain State Insurance Services was just one piece of a larger puzzle, but it was the perfect place to begin revealing my true position. The company employed 43 agents across Colorado and Wyoming, generating millions in annual revenue through life insurance, auto coverage, and investment products. Vanessa Park was listed as a mid-level performer, earning decent commissions. But nothing exceptional. What made her situation particularly interesting was the series of recent policy sales she'd completed with Derek as her client. The documentation showed she'd convinced him to increase his life insurance coverage substantially, taking out new policies that would benefit his designated beneficiary in the event of his death. Given their relationship timeline, I suspected Derek had already changed his beneficiary designation from me to Vanessa. The irony was perfect. Derek had increased his life insurance coverage through the woman he was leaving me for, never realizing that every dollar of commission she earned ultimately flowed through companies I controlled. His betrayal wasn't just personally devastating, it was financing my business empire. As I prepared for bed in the house that would soon be mine alone, I felt a calm sense of anticipation rather than the devastation everyone expected. Derek had taught me an invaluable lesson about the difference between having power and appearing to have power. For years, he'd appeared to be the dominant partner in our marriage while I quietly accumulated real control over significant business assets. Tomorrow would begin the process of revealing that distinction to everyone involved. Derek and Vanessa had made their choice based on incomplete information about who held the real power in this situation. They were about to receive a very thorough education on that subject. The last thing I did before sleep was send a brief email to Robert Chen, confirming our meeting schedule for the following day and requesting that he prepare a comprehensive presentation on all insurance subsidiary operations. It was time to step out of the shadows and claim my rightful position as the person who'd been quietly pulling the strings all along. Derek had wanted his freedom, and I was prepared to give it to him. But freedom came with consequences, and some lessons could only be learned the hard way. The gleaming conference room on the 32nd floor of the Pinnacle Financial Group building in downtown Denver felt like stepping into a different world entirely. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the Rocky Mountains, while polished mahogany furnishings and crystal water glasses spoke to the kind of corporate power I'd been wielding from behind the scenes for years. But today marked the first time I'd walked through these doors as myself rather than hiding behind lawyers and intermediaries. Robert Chen was already seated at the head of the massive conference table when I arrived, his silver hair perfectly styled and his expression carrying the satisfaction of someone who'd been waiting years for this moment. Beside him sat Catherine Morrison, my attorney, her briefcase open and documents arranged with military precision. The third person in the room was someone I'd never met face to face but whose quarterly reports I'd been reading for 2 years. James Hartwell rose from his chair as I entered, his tall frame and distinguished bearing exactly what I'd expected from his voice during our phone conversations. At 55, he commanded the respect that came with successfully managing a multi-million-dollar financial services company, but today his confident demeanor was tempered by obvious curiosity about finally meeting his mysterious primary stakeholder. "Ms. Hayes, it's an honor to finally meet you in person," James said, extending his hand with the kind of firm handshake that had probably sealed countless business deals. "I have to admit, I've been intensely curious about the woman behind Pinnacle's remarkable growth over the past few years." I accepted his handshake while studying his face for any sign of condescension or surprise at my appearance. Some men in his position struggled to reconcile successful business leadership with women who didn't fit their preconceived notions, but James seemed genuinely respectful rather than merely polite. "The pleasure is mutual, James. Your management has exceeded every expectation I had when we first acquired controlling interest in Pinnacle. Today, however, I need to take a more direct role in certain subsidiary operations." Robert gestured toward the chair at the opposite head of the table, a position that clearly established me as the ultimate authority in the room. As I settled into the leather chair, Catherine distributed bound reports to each person present, her movements efficient and professional. "These documents outline Amanda's ownership structure across all Pinnacle subsidiaries," Catherine explained, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent decades navigating complex corporate law. "As you can see, her controlling stake gives her the right to assume direct operational oversight of any company under the Pinnacle umbrella." James opened his copy of the report, his eyebrows rising slightly as he absorbed the scope of my holdings. "I knew you held majority control, but I hadn't realized the extent of the subsidiary network. This represents a significant portion of Colorado's independent insurance market." The documents Catherine had prepared revealed the careful structure Robert and I had built over 3 years of strategic acquisitions. Rather than purchasing large, established companies that would attract attention, we'd systematically bought struggling smaller firms and revitalized them under professional management. The approach had allowed me to build substantial market influence while maintaining complete anonymity. That anonymity served its purpose, I said, meeting James's gaze directly. But circumstances have changed, and I need to exercise direct control over Mountain State Insurance Services immediately. Robert cleared his throat and opened his own folder, revealing detailed financial reports and organizational charts for the insurance agency in question. Mountain State has been one of our most successful rehabilitation projects. When we acquired them 18 months ago, they were hemorrhaging money due to poor management and high agent turnover. Under Pinnacle's oversight, they've returned to profitability and expanded their agent network significantly. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on any of us. While Derek had been dismissing my capabilities and intelligence, I'd been quietly rescuing failing businesses and transforming them into profitable enterprises. Mountain State's turnaround represented exactly the kind of business acumen that Derek claimed I lacked. James studied the Mountain State documentation with professional interest. Their current management team has been performing well. Is there a specific operational issue that requires immediate intervention? Catherine and Robert both looked to me, understanding that the personal nature of my interest in Mountain State couldn't be fully explained without revealing details about my failed marriage. But I decided that selective honesty would serve my purposes better than elaborate fiction. There's been a significant conflict of interest involving one of their agents, I said carefully. Someone who has been using her professional relationship with clients to pursue personal relationships that compromise the integrity of her position. The three business professionals around the table nodded with the kind of understanding that came from years of dealing with workplace ethics violations. None of them needed to know that the client in question was my soon-to-be ex-husband and that the personal relationship had destroyed my marriage. We'll need to schedule a comprehensive review of all agent activities, James said, making notes in his planner. Should I arrange for the current management team to prepare personnel files and client interaction records? Actually, I want to handle the initial assessment personally, I replied, feeling a surge of anticipation at the thought of walking into Vanessa Park's workplace as her ultimate boss. Can you arrange for me to visit their offices tomorrow morning? I'd prefer to observe their operations firsthand before making any decisions about personnel changes. Robert's slight smile suggested he understood exactly what I was planning, even if James remained focused on the purely business aspects of the situation. I'll coordinate with their management to ensure you have full access to all facilities and records. The meeting continued for another hour as we reviewed financial projections, discussed expansion strategies, and planned the transition of several other subsidiaries to more direct oversight. But my attention kept returning to the Mountain State files, particularly the agent roster that included Vanessa Park's employment history and performance metrics. According to the documentation, Vanessa had been hired 14 months ago after previous experience with a larger insurance company in California. Her sales numbers were solid but not exceptional, placing her in the middle tier of Mountain State's agent rankings. What was interesting was the notable improvement in her commission earnings over the past 6 months, coinciding exactly with the timeline of her relationship with Derek. After the formal meeting concluded and James departed with his new instructions, I remained in the conference room with Robert and Catherine to discuss the more delicate aspects of my plans. Are you certain you want to handle this so directly? Catherine asked, her tone carrying the protective concern of someone who'd been managing my legal interests for years. There are less confrontational ways to address personnel issues, especially given the personal nature of your grievances. Robert leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. From a purely business perspective, Amanda has every right to conduct surprise inspections of her subsidiaries. If there happen to be personal benefits to that oversight, it's simply a fortunate coincidence. I appreciated both perspectives, but my decision had already crystallized during our discussion of Mountain State's operations. I've spent 3 years building this business empire in secret, allowing other people to make decisions about companies I own. Derek's betrayal has taught me that staying in the shadows doesn't protect you from people who assume you're powerless. Catherine nodded slowly, understanding the deeper implications of my statement. In that case, we should prepare documentation establishing your authority to make immediate personnel decisions. If you discover actionable misconduct during your visit, you'll want to be able to respond decisively. The drive home from downtown Denver gave me time to process the magnitude of what I'd set in motion. For years, my business activities had been abstract, filtered through reports and quarterly statements rather than direct experience. Tomorrow would mark my first time walking into a company I owned and asserting authority over people who had no idea I existed. The house felt different when I returned, less like a shrine to Derek's absence and more like a launching pad for my new life. I spent the evening reviewing personnel files for all 43 agents employed by Mountain State, familiarizing myself with names, territories, and performance histories. Several agents had impressive track records that deserved recognition, while others showed concerning patterns that warranted investigation. Vanessa Park's file revealed details that Derek had never mentioned during his supposed business discussions with her. She'd been divorced for 3 years, had no children, and lived in an expensive apartment complex in Cherry Creek that seemed beyond the means of a mid-level insurance agent. Her client list included several high-net-worth individuals whose policies generated substantial commissions, but the timing of these acquisitions raised questions about how she'd gained access to such lucrative prospects. The puzzle pieces began forming a clearer picture as I cross-referenced Vanessa's client acquisitions with Derek's professional network. Several of her recent high-value clients were executives at companies that did business with Derek's marketing firm. It appeared that Derek had been providing Vanessa with leads and introductions, essentially using his professional relationships to boost her career while conducting their affair. This revelation added another layer of betrayal to Derek's actions. Not only had he been cheating on me personally, but he'd been compromising his professional integrity to benefit his mistress financially. The ethics violations involved went far beyond simple adultery into potential conflicts of interest that could damage both their careers. My phone rang as I was reviewing the final client files, Caroline's name appearing on the screen. I'd been avoiding most calls from friends and family, not ready to explain my business activities but also not wanting to maintain the fiction of helpless abandonment. Amanda, honey, I've been worried about you. You've been so quiet since Monday night. Are you eating? Do you need me to bring dinner? Caroline's maternal concern was genuine, but I could hear the underlying curiosity in her voice. Our social circle was undoubtedly buzzing with speculation about how I was handling Derek's very public abandonment and what my financial situation might look like going forward. I'm doing better than you might expect, I said honestly. Actually, I'm discovering that Derek leaving might be the best thing that could have happened to me. The silence on Caroline's end of the line stretched for several seconds as she processed this unexpected response. Are you sure you're okay? I mean, I know you're putting on a brave face, but you don't have to pretend with me. Her assumption that I was performing strength rather than genuinely feeling it was both understandable and frustrating. Everyone who knew me as Derek's wife had seen only the version of myself that I'd presented to maintain harmony in my marriage. They had no context for understanding the woman I'd been becoming in private. Caroline, I need you to trust me when I say that things are going to work out very well. Derek and Vanessa think they've won some kind of prize, but they're going to learn otherwise very soon. After ending the call with Caroline, I spent the evening preparing for my first day as an active business owner. The clothes I selected were carefully chosen to project authority while remaining approachable, a navy suit that conveyed professionalism without seeming intimidating. I'd learned from watching Derek's career that first impressions in business settings could determine the entire tone of subsequent interactions. The final task of the evening was drafting a brief email to Derek, informing him that I would be unavailable for discussions about our divorce proceedings for the next few days, due to business commitments. His response came within minutes, expressing surprise that I had business commitments significant enough to delay our separation logistics. His assumption that my time was infinitely flexible and my priorities trivial provided perfect insight into how thoroughly he'd underestimated me throughout our marriage. Derek had never bothered to ask detailed questions about how I spent my days, content to assume that managing our household and social obligations constituted the full extent of my capabilities. Tomorrow would begin the process of correcting that misperception in the most dramatic way possible. Derek and Vanessa had built their relationship on the foundation of my supposed inadequacy and dependence. They were about to discover that foundation was not only false but actively dangerous to their own security. As I reviewed the Mountain State organizational chart one final time before bed, I felt a sense of anticipation that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with finally claiming the authority I'd earned. For too long, I'd allowed other people to make assumptions about my capabilities while I built real power in secret. Derek had taught me that hiding your strength doesn't protect you from people who mistake kindness for weakness. Vanessa had demonstrated that some people will exploit any advantage they perceive, regardless of the ethics involved. Together, they created the perfect circumstances for me to step out of the shadows and demonstrate what I'd been building while they focused on their selfish desires. The morning would bring my first experience as an openly powerful woman rather than a secretly influential one. After years of careful planning and patient investment, it was time to collect dividends that went far beyond financial returns. Derek and Vanessa had given me the perfect opportunity to reclaim my identity and demonstrate my true capabilities. The woman they'd both underestimated was about to become their boss. The Mountain State Insurance Services building sat in a modest strip mall in suburban Denver, its glass storefront displaying cheerful promotional materials about life insurance savings and family financial security. From the outside, it looked like exactly the kind of middle-market insurance agency that Derek would have dismissed as beneath his professional interests. Walking through those doors at 9:15 on Thursday morning, I felt the electric thrill of entering a business I owned but had never seen. The reception area buzzed with typical office energy, agents arriving with coffee cups and discussing their client appointments for the day. A young receptionist with carefully styled blonde hair looked up from her computer screen as I approached, her professional smile bright and welcoming. "Good morning, how can I help you today?" "I'm here to see Margaret Williams, your office manager. She should be expecting me." The receptionist's fingers flew across her keyboard as she checked the appointment calendar. "You must be Ms. Hayes from the corporate office. Let me let Margaret know you're here." Corporate office. The phrase sent a small thrill through me as I realized this was my first time being acknowledged as someone with legitimate business authority rather than simply Derek's well-dressed wife attending social functions. Even this modest reception area represented territory I controlled, decisions I influenced, and livelihoods that ultimately depended on my business success. Margaret Williams emerged from a hallway lined with individual agent offices, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun and her expression carrying the focused professionalism of someone who'd been managing insurance operations for decades. She extended her hand with a firm grip, her eyes appraising me with the kind of assessment experienced managers use to quickly evaluate new corporate oversight. "Ms. Hayes, it's a pleasure to meet you. I have to admit, we were all quite curious when Mr. Hartwell called to say someone from ownership would be conducting an operational review. We don't usually see corporate representatives at our level." Her honesty was refreshing, and I could immediately understand why this office had become profitable under her management. Margaret struck me as someone who focused on results rather than politics, exactly the kind of person I wanted running my subsidiaries. "I appreciate your directness, Margaret. I've been impressed by the turnaround this office has achieved over the past 18 months. Today I'd like to observe your operations firsthand and perhaps speak with some of your agents about their experiences." Margaret nodded efficiently, pulling a folder from under her arm. "I've prepared a summary of our current operations, including agent performance metrics and client satisfaction surveys. Would you like to start with a tour of the facilities, or would you prefer to review the documentation first?" "Let's start with the tour. I'd like to see how the office functions during normal business hours." As Margaret led me through the building, I found myself genuinely interested in the day-to-day operations of an insurance agency. The office was efficiently organized, with individual agent workstations arranged to provide privacy for client calls while maintaining an open, collaborative atmosphere. A conference room at the back of the building featured whiteboards covered with sales targets and motivational charts, evidence of Margaret's hands-on management style. Our agents typically work a combination of phone prospecting, referral follow-up, and scheduled client meetings, Margaret explained as we paused near a cluster of workstations. "We found that mixing experienced agents with newer hires creates a mentoring environment that benefits everyone." The agents we passed seemed focused and professional, their conversations with clients covering everything from family life insurance needs to small business coverage options. I recognized several names from the personnel files I'd reviewed, but one workstation remained conspicuously empty despite the morning being well underway. "Is everyone in the office today?" I asked casually, though I suspected I already knew which agent was absent. Margaret's expression tightened slightly. "Actually, we have one agent who called in this morning requesting a personal day. Vanessa Park. She's normally very reliable, so I approved the request, but the timing is unfortunate given your visit." Perfect. Vanessa had probably spent the night celebrating her victory with Derek, unaware that her new boyfriend's abandoned wife was about to become her direct supervisor. The absence actually worked to my advantage, giving me time to review her files and speak with other agents before our inevitable confrontation. "That's fine. Perhaps I could review her client files and speak with some of the other agents about the office dynamics." Margaret led me to a small conference room where she'd arranged Vanessa's personnel file alongside client account summaries. As I reviewed the documentation, several patterns became immediately apparent that raised serious questions about her business practices. "These commission numbers are quite impressive," I noted, pointing to Vanessa's earnings over the past 6 months. "Has she shared her strategies with other agents?" Margaret's hesitation suggested she'd been wondering about the same issues. "Vanessa has been somewhat secretive about her client acquisition methods. She's mentioned having connections in the business community, but she's been reluctant to share specific networking strategies with the team." The euphemism was diplomatically phrased, but Margaret's concern was clear. Experienced insurance managers recognized when agents had unusually successful periods that couldn't be explained by standard prospecting methods. Vanessa's sudden access to high-value clients had probably been raising red flags for months. Has she brought any clients to company events or networking functions? That's actually been a point of concern, Margaret admitted, her professional demeanor giving way to frank discussion. Most of our top performers enjoy showcasing their success at our quarterly client appreciation events. Vanessa always has excuses for why her clients can't attend, claiming scheduling conflicts or preferring private service. The picture emerging from Margaret's observations aligned perfectly with what I'd suspected about Vanessa's relationship with Derek. She'd been leveraging his professional network to acquire clients while keeping her methods hidden from her colleagues and supervisors. The arrangement had boosted her commissions while compromising her professional integrity. I'd like to speak with a few other agents about office morale and team dynamics, I said, closing Vanessa's file. Can you recommend someone who would give me honest feedback about how the office functions? Margaret immediately suggested Jennifer Walsh, a veteran agent with 15 years of experience who served as an informal mentor to newer team members. Jennifer was a woman in her early 40s with the kind of straightforward manner that came from years of successful client relationships built on trust and competence. Ms. Hayes, it's nice to meet someone from corporate who's interested in hearing from the agents directly, Jennifer said as we settled into chairs in Margaret's office. Most of the time, corporate oversight feels pretty distant from our daily operations. I believe successful businesses require input from people who interact with clients every day. What's your assessment of how this office functions compared to other agencies you've worked with? Jennifer's response was thoughtful and measured. Overall, this is one of the best environments I've experienced. Margaret runs a tight ship but treats everyone fairly. The team dynamic is generally collaborative, though there have been some concerns recently about transparency in client acquisition methods. Can you elaborate on those concerns? Well, I don't want to speak negatively about a colleague, but some of us have noticed that certain agents seem to have access to prospects that don't come through normal referral channels or prospecting activities. It creates an uneven playing field when some people appear to have advantages that aren't available to the whole team. Jennifer's diplomacy was admirable, but her message was unmistakable. Vanessa's success had been creating tension within the office because other agents couldn't understand how she was consistently acquiring high-value clients without using standard prospecting methods. Have you observed any specific behaviors that concern you from a professional ethics standpoint? Jennifer paused, clearly weighing her words carefully. I've noticed one agent who seems to schedule a lot of evening client meetings at upscale restaurants rather than conducting business during normal office hours. There's also been some discussion about whether certain client relationships extend beyond strictly professional boundaries. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Jennifer providing insights that confirmed my suspicions about Vanessa's questionable business practices. Other agents had been wondering about her methods for months, but the hierarchical nature of corporate oversight had prevented them from raising formal concerns. After meeting with Jennifer, I spoke with two other experienced agents who provided similar observations about office dynamics and concerns about unethical client acquisition methods. The picture that emerged was of a generally well-run office with one problematic agent whose success was creating morale issues and potential legal liabilities. Margaret joined me for lunch at a nearby restaurant, where our conversation shifted from operational details to broader strategic questions about the insurance industry. Her experience and insights were invaluable, confirming my assessment that she was exactly the kind of manager I wanted running my subsidiaries. Margaret, I want to be frank with you about why I'm here, I said as we finished our meal. There are some serious ethical concerns regarding one of your agents that require immediate attention. I'll need to conduct a formal investigation, but I want you to understand that this reflects no criticism of your management. Margaret's expression grew serious. Are we talking about Vanessa Park? Her immediate identification of the problem agent confirmed that my concerns were shared by local management. What makes you ask that specific question? I've been managing insurance offices for 23 years, Ms. Hayes. I know when an agent's success doesn't align with their visible activities. Vanessa's numbers have been impressive, but her methods have been questionable from the beginning. I've been wondering when someone would ask the right questions. The relief in Margaret's voice suggested she'd been carrying concerns about Vanessa for months without knowing how to address them through corporate channels. My visit was providing her with the opportunity to finally raise issues that had been troubling her professional judgment. I'll need you to prepare a comprehensive file on all of Vanessa's client relationships, including copies of applications, policy documents, and any correspondence in her files. I also want security footage from the office covering the past 6 months, particularly focusing on after-hours access. Margaret nodded grimly. I can have everything ready by tomorrow morning. Should I be prepared for legal complications? Quite possibly. But I want you to understand that taking action on ethical violations protects the agency and all the other agents who've been conducting business professionally. We can't allow questionable practices to continue just because they're generating short-term revenue. The afternoon brought meetings with the office's newest agents, recent hires who provided fresh perspectives on training procedures and office culture. Their feedback was universally positive about Margaret's management and the collaborative environment she'd created, but several mentioned feeling intimidated by agents who seemed to have mysterious advantages in client acquisition. By 4 o'clock, I had accumulated enough evidence to justify immediate action regarding Vanessa's employment status. Her pattern of after-hours client meetings, secretive prospecting methods, and unusually high success rate with wealthy prospects painted a clear picture of someone who was compromising professional boundaries for personal gain. More importantly, my investigation had revealed that Derek's role in providing Vanessa with client leads represented a serious conflict of interest that could expose both his marketing firm and Mountain State Insurance to legal liability. His professional reputation and career prospects were far more vulnerable than he realized. As I prepared to leave the Mountain State offices, Margaret approached me with a final observation that crystallized the situation perfectly. "Ms. Hayes, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but it's refreshing to see corporate ownership that cares about ethical standards. Too many companies prioritize short-term profits over long-term integrity. Whatever action you decide to take regarding our problem agent, you have my full support." The drive back to Denver gave me time to process everything I'd learned during my first day as an active business owner. The experience had been both educational and empowering, confirming that my years of careful investment had created genuine value rather than mere financial returns. Margaret and her team were building something worthwhile, and protecting that required decisive action against people who threatened its integrity. More personally, my investigation had revealed the full scope of Derek and Vanessa's deception. Their relationship wasn't just an affair, it was a conspiracy to exploit professional relationships for personal benefit. Derek had been using his business connections to advance Vanessa's career while she used those advantages to build a lifestyle that attracted his attention. The web of mutual exploitation they'd created was about to collapse spectacularly. Derek had no idea that his efforts to help Vanessa succeed had actually been helping me build evidence of their professional misconduct. Vanessa had no idea that every commission she'd earned through Derek's introductions had ultimately enriched the woman whose husband she'd stolen. Tomorrow would bring the confrontation I'd been anticipating since Monday night, but now it would unfold on my terms rather than theirs. Derek and Vanessa thought they held all the advantages in our triangle, but they'd built their relationship on a foundation that I controlled completely. The woman they'd both underestimated was about to demonstrate the difference between appearing powerful and actually wielding power. Their education was going to be thorough, decisive, and absolutely devastating to everything they thought they'd won. Friday morning arrived with the crisp clarity that only comes after difficult decisions have crystallized into decisive action. I dressed carefully for what I knew would be the most important business meeting of my life, selecting a charcoal gray power suit that conveyed authority without seeming theatrical. The woman reflected in my bedroom mirror looked confident and composed, a stark contrast to the shattered wife who had stood in the same spot just 4 days earlier. Patty arrived at my house precisely at 7:30, her arms full of legal documents and her expression carrying the focused intensity of someone who understood the significance of the day ahead. We spread the paperwork across my dining room table, reviewing termination procedures, evidence documentation, and the corporate authorization forms that would allow me to act with complete authority at Mountain State Insurance Services. "Everything is in order," Patty confirmed, organizing the documents into leather portfolios. "Margaret has prepared Vanessa's complete personnel file, including copies of all questionable client interactions. Catherine has drafted the termination paperwork with causes clearly documented to prevent any wrongful dismissal claims." The evidence we'd accumulated over the past 2 days painted an unmistakable picture of professional misconduct. Vanessa had been using Derek's business connections to acquire high-value clients while concealing her methods from her supervisors and colleagues. More damaging still, several of her client meetings had occurred at expensive restaurants and bars during evening hours, suggesting relationship building that extended far beyond professional boundaries. "Has Derek responded to your message about postponing divorce discussions?" Patty asked as she sealed the final document folder. I smiled, remembering Derek's increasingly frustrated text messages over the past 2 days. His assumption that I would be available at his convenience for separation logistics had been rudely interrupted by my sudden unavailability due to pressing business commitments. Each time he demanded to know what business could possibly be more important than finalizing our divorce, I'd responded with vague references to time-sensitive opportunities that required my immediate attention. He's been getting more agitated with each message. Yesterday he accused me of creating delays just to spite him. He has no concept that I might have legitimate professional obligations that don't revolve around his schedule. The drive to Mountain State Insurance Services felt different than my first visit 2 days earlier. Today I wasn't observing operations or gathering information, I was arriving to exercise the full authority of ownership in ways that would permanently alter several lives. The modest strip mall building looked exactly the same from the outside. But everything about the power dynamics inside was about to change dramatically. Margaret Williams met me at the reception area, her expression carrying the grim satisfaction of a manager who was finally able to address problems she'd been documenting for months. In her hands was a thick folder containing the complete record of Vanessa Park's employment, from her initial application through the most recent client acquisition reports. She called in again this morning, Margaret reported as we walked toward her office. Third day this week she's requested personal time. I told her we needed to discuss her recent absence pattern and scheduled a mandatory meeting for 10:30. Perfect timing. Vanessa would arrive expecting a routine administrative discussion about her work schedule, only to discover that her ultimate employer had been conducting a comprehensive investigation of her professional conduct. The surprise would be complete and devastating. I want to review her complete file one more time before she arrives, I said, settling into Margaret's office with the personnel documents spread across the conference table. Vanessa's employment application revealed details that took on new significance in light of recent discoveries. She'd claimed extensive experience with high-net-worth clients at her previous position in California, but her references had been notably sparse and difficult to verify. Her salary requirements had been modest, suggesting someone eager to establish herself in a new market rather than someone with proven success in luxury client services. The commission reports told a more revealing story. For her first 6 months at Mountain State, Vanessa's earnings had been respectable but unremarkable, consistent with an agent still building her client base through standard prospecting methods. But 7 months ago, her numbers had begun climbing dramatically, coinciding exactly with Derek's initial consultation about updating our life insurance coverage. The timeline is damning, I murmured, cross-referencing Vanessa's performance spike with Derek's credit card statements that Patty had obtained through our joint accounts. Restaurant charges at upscale establishments had begun appearing regularly, always for 2 people and always during evening hours when Derek claimed to be working late or attending client events. Margaret glanced at the documents over my shoulder. I've been wondering about those evening meetings for months. Legitimate client discussions don't typically require dinner at restaurants that cost more than most people's mortgage payments. At exactly 10:25, the sound of heels clicking across the reception area announced Vanessa's arrival. Through Margaret's office window, I could see her speaking with the receptionist, her body language confident and relaxed. She wore a stunning red dress that probably cost more than most insurance agents earned in a week, her hair styled with the kind of professional polish that suggested regular salon appointments. "She's here," Margaret announced unnecessarily, her voice carrying the anticipation of someone who'd been waiting months to address problematic behavior. "Give me 2 minutes to position myself, then bring her to the conference room. I want her to see the documentation before she sees me." I arranged Vanessa's personnel file at the head of the conference table, ensuring that her commission reports and client acquisition timeline were clearly visible to anyone entering the room. Catherine's termination paperwork sat in a separate folder, ready to be presented once the initial confrontation was complete. Margaret returned with Vanessa in tow, her expression professionally neutral despite the gravity of what was about to unfold. Vanessa entered the conference room with the confident stride of someone who expected a routine administrative meeting, her attention initially focused on Margaret rather than scanning the room for other occupants. "Vanessa, thank you for coming in on short notice," Margaret began formally. "We have some concerns about your recent performance that require immediate discussion." It was only then that Vanessa noticed me sitting at the far end of the conference table, her eyes widening with shock and confusion as she recognized Derek's wife in what should have been a private workplace meeting. The color drained from her face as the implications of my presence began registering, her confident posture wavering as she tried to process this unexpected development. "Amanda? What are you doing here?" Vanessa's voice carried a mixture of guilt and bewilderment, her carefully maintained professional composure cracking under the pressure of being confronted in her workplace by the woman whose husband she'd stolen. "I'm here in my capacity as the primary stakeholder of Pinnacle Financial Group," I replied calmly, gesturing toward the chair across from me. "Please, have a seat. We have quite a lot to discuss regarding your employment with Mountain State Insurance Services." The words hit Vanessa like physical blows, her face cycling through disbelief, confusion, and dawning horror as she realized the impossible situation she'd stumbled into. Her legs seemed to give out beneath her as she sank into the offered chair, her hands trembling as she reached for the water glass Margaret had placed on the table. "I don't understand," Vanessa whispered, her voice barely audible. "You're Derek's wife. You can't be involved with my company." "Actually, I own your company," I corrected gently, sliding her personnel file across the table. "Pinnacle Financial Group acquired Mountain State Insurance Services 18 months ago. Every paycheck you've received, every commission you've earned, every benefit you've enjoyed has ultimately come from me." Margaret took her seat beside me, her expression professionally neutral but her satisfaction barely concealed. "Ms. Hayes has been conducting a comprehensive review of our operations, with particular attention to agent performance and ethical compliance." Vanessa's hands shook as she opened her personnel file, her eyes scanning the documentation that revealed the scope of the investigation into her conduct. Commission reports, client acquisition timelines, and copies of expense reports painted an unmistakable picture of someone who had been mixing personal relationships with professional obligations. "This is impossible," Vanessa said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Derek would have known. He would have told me if his wife owned an insurance company." "Derek doesn't know," I replied simply. "Derek has never shown any interest in my business activities. He's been quite content to assume that I spend my days managing our household and attending charity events while he focuses on his important career." The irony of the situation was clearly dawning on Vanessa as she absorbed the full implications of what I was revealing. Her affair with Derek hadn't just destroyed my marriage, it had been conducted under the financial umbrella of my own business empire. Every romantic dinner, every expensive gift, every commission she'd earned to afford her lifestyle had been funded ultimately by the woman she'd betrayed. "The evidence we've compiled regarding your professional conduct is quite comprehensive," I continued, opening the folder containing copies of her questionable client interactions. Evening meetings at expensive restaurants, client relationships that extend beyond professional boundaries, and most concerning, the systematic use of undisclosed personal connections to acquire high-value accounts. Margaret leaned forward, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd been documenting problems for months. "We have security footage showing you accessing the office after hours to prepare materials for clients who never appear on our standard appointment schedules. We also have expense reports for meetings that violate company policies regarding appropriate client interaction venues." Vanessa's composure finally shattered completely as the full scope of the evidence became clear. Tears began streaming down her face as she realized that her carefully constructed success story was about to collapse around her. "Amanda, please, you have to understand," she began desperately. "I never meant for any of this to happen. Derek and I just connected. And one thing led to another. The business success was separate from our personal relationship." "Was it?" I asked, pulling out Derek's credit card statements that showed the pattern of expensive dinners coinciding with her client acquisitions. "Because the timeline suggests otherwise. Your commission earnings increased dramatically right around the time Derek began introducing you to his professional network. The documentation was irrefutable, showing a clear correlation between Derek's business connections and Vanessa's sudden access to high-value insurance prospects. What they'd both probably rationalized as Derek being supportive of his new girlfriend's career was actually a systematic corruption of professional ethics that exposed both of them to serious legal consequences. Derek provided client referrals," Vanessa admitted quietly, her voice barely audible. "He said it was normal for couples to help each other's careers. I didn't think anyone would see it as inappropriate." Margaret's expression hardened at this admission. "Using personal relationships to gain unfair advantage in client acquisition is a violation of both company policy and state insurance regulations. It's also grounds for immediate termination and potential license revocation." I felt a surge of satisfaction as the full scope of Derek and Vanessa's misconduct became clear to everyone in the room. They'd both been so focused on their immediate desires that they'd failed to consider the ethical and legal implications of their actions. Derek had compromised his professional integrity to help his mistress while she'd built her success on violations that could destroy her career. "There's more," I said, pulling out the final folder that contained the most damaging evidence. "Our investigation revealed that several of the policies you sold through Derek's connections have been modified recently, with beneficiary designations changed from existing family members to new recipients." Vanessa's face went white as she realized I was referring to Derek's decision to change his life insurance beneficiary from me to her. The timing of that change, occurring while she was conducting an affair with a married man, created additional ethical complications that went far beyond simple romantic infidelity. The State Insurance Commission takes a very dim view of agents who appear to be influencing beneficiary changes for personal gain, Margaret added, her voice carrying the weight of someone who understood the serious legal implications. Particularly when those changes occur in the context of undisclosed personal relationships. I stood up from my chair, feeling the full power of my position as I looked down at the woman who had destroyed my marriage while unknowingly working for me. Vanessa Park, your employment with Mountain State Insurance Services is terminated immediately for violations of professional conduct, ethical standards, and company policy. Catherine's termination paperwork slid across the table with a satisfying whisper, the legal documentation that would end Vanessa's career and potentially trigger an investigation that could destroy Derek's professional reputation as well. You have 15 minutes to collect your personal belongings from your workstation, Margaret announced, consulting her watch. Security will escort you from the building, and your access to company systems has already been revoked. Vanessa stared at the termination papers through her tears, the reality of her situation finally sinking in completely. Amanda, please, can't we work something out? I'll end things with Derek. I'll find another job. This will destroy everything I've worked for. You should have considered those consequences before you decided to steal my husband and compromise your professional integrity, I replied without sympathy. Actions have consequences, Vanessa. You're about to learn that lesson very thoroughly. As security arrived to escort Vanessa from the building, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with justice. She'd built her success on deception and exploitation, hurting innocent people while enriching herself through unethical means. The collapse of that house of cards was long overdue. But the morning's business was far from complete. Derek still had no idea that his abandoned wife owned the company that had just destroyed his girlfriend's career. His education was about to begin in earnest. My phone rang as Vanessa's escort disappeared down the hallway, Derek's name appearing on the screen with perfect timing. I answered with a calm professionalism that must have sounded strange to someone expecting emotional distress. Derek, what a coincidence. I was just thinking about you. Amanda, we need to finalize our separation arrangements immediately. I'm tired of these delays while you play around with whatever business fantasy you're pursuing. Vanessa and I want to move forward with our lives. Actually, Derek, I think you'll find that Vanessa's plans have changed rather dramatically. In fact, I suspect she's going to need your emotional support quite urgently. The confusion in Derek's voice was palpable. What are you talking about? Vanessa's at work. She can't take calls during business hours. Derek, I'm calling you from Vanessa's workplace, Mountain State Insurance Services, where she was just terminated for professional misconduct. I thought you might want to know that your girlfriend is currently unemployed and facing potential legal action for ethics violations. The silence on Derek's end of the line stretched for nearly 30 seconds as he processed this impossible information. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the strained confusion of someone whose entire worldview was shifting beneath his feet. That's impossible. You don't know anything about Vanessa's job. How would you even know where she works? I know. Because I own the company she worked for, Derek. Mountain State Insurance Services is a subsidiary of Pinnacle Financial Group, which I've controlled for the past 3 years. Every commission check Vanessa earned, every benefit she received, every success she celebrated was ultimately funded by me. The sound of Derek's sharp intake of breath was audible through the phone. You're lying. You don't own anything. You've never worked in insurance. This is some kind of sick joke. Derek, I understand this is difficult to accept. You've spent our entire marriage assuming I was incapable of building anything significant while you focused on your important career. But while you were dismissing my capabilities, I was acquiring companies and building wealth that you never imagined existed. Margaret watched the conversation with undisguised fascination, clearly enjoying the moment when Derek's misconceptions about my abilities were being shattered in real time. The evidence of professional misconduct is quite extensive, I continued, my voice remaining calm despite the satisfaction I felt. Vanessa used your business connections to acquire clients while concealing her methods from her supervisors. She violated company policies regarding appropriate client relationships. Most damaging of all, she appears to have influenced beneficiary changes on policies sold through your referrals. This is insane, Derek protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Even if what you're saying is true, you can't destroy someone's career just because you're angry about our relationship. I'm not destroying anyone's career out of anger, Derek. I'm protecting my business interests and ensuring ethical standards are maintained across my companies. Vanessa destroyed her own career through her choices and actions. The conversation continued for several more minutes as Derek struggled to accept the reality of what had transpired. His confident assumption that he held all the power in our separation had been completely inverted, leaving him scrambling to understand how his abandoned wife had become his girlfriend's employer and judge. "Derek, there's one more thing you should know," I said as our conversation neared its end. "The State Insurance Commission will be conducting a formal investigation into the professional conduct violations we've documented. Your role in providing client referrals to someone you were having an affair with constitutes a serious conflict of interest that could impact your own career." The sharp intake of breath on Derek's end of the line indicated that he was beginning to understand the full scope of the consequences he and Vanessa had created through their actions. "Your marketing firm's relationship with several clients could be jeopardized if they learn you were using those connections to benefit your mistress financially. Professional integrity matters in business, Derek. You taught me that lesson yourself." After ending the call with Derek, I spent another hour at Mountain State Insurance Services, working with Margaret to ensure that Vanessa's termination was properly documented and that her client accounts were transferred to other agents without disruption. The business would continue operating smoothly, but with renewed focus on ethical standards and professional integrity. The drive home gave me time to reflect on how completely the power dynamics in my life had shifted over the course of 1 week. Derek and Vanessa had both made choices based on their perception of my weakness and dependence, never imagining that the woman they'd dismissed was actually the person controlling their financial security. Their education in the difference between appearing powerful and actually wielding power had been thorough and devastating. Derek would spend the coming weeks dealing with professional consequences that could damage his career permanently, while Vanessa faced the collapse of everything she'd built through deception and exploitation. But my own transformation was far from complete. This experience had taught me the value of stepping out of the shadows and claiming credit for my accomplishments rather than hiding behind the fiction of feminine helplessness. The business empire I'd built deserved to be acknowledged and celebrated, not concealed to protect someone else's ego. As I pulled into the driveway of the house that would soon be mine alone, I felt a profound sense of liberation that had nothing to do with escaping a bad marriage and everything to do with finally becoming the woman I was meant to be. Derek's betrayal had accidentally set me free to claim my true power and identity. The woman he'd abandoned in favor of his insurance agent had turned out to own the entire company. Sometimes life's ironies were so perfect they seemed scripted by a particularly creative storyteller. But this was my reality, earned through years of careful planning and patient investment while everyone around me assumed I was simply playing house. Derek and Vanessa had learned a valuable lesson about making assumptions based on incomplete information. Their fairy tale romance had been built on foundations that I controlled completely, and their dreams of superior status had crumbled the moment I decided to step into the light. The future stretched ahead of me with unlimited possibilities, no longer constrained by someone else's limited vision of what I could achieve. Derek had done me the greatest favor of my life by leaving, even though that had never been his intention. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.